from the office of Jose Serrano, if you can join us in welcoming Suad Hassan.
Hi everybody, my name is Suad Hassan and I'm a community liaison for Senator Serrano. So basically the senator is in Albany, just like Rebecca mentioned, so he regrets not being here. Just this week, the Senate and the Assembly came to an agreement on the strongest tenant protections and affordable housing legislation in our history. The senator is also working with the governor's office to get the REAC board filled by the end of this session. If I can't answer any of your questions, in the note cards, can you add a contact number? That way I can call you after speaking with our legislative director. And I just wanted to mention that I am on the island every Thursday, either at the Senior Center or at the Library for Constituent Services. So if you have any issues and you're unable to come to our office in East Harlem, I am on the island every week. So, thank you. Any questions? Or what?
I have some questions we can answer as a panel. Perfect. We will now have from the office of Congresswoman Maloney, David Leeds, if we can join him and welcome him.
Hi everyone, my name is David Leeds. I work for Congresswoman Maloney in her Manhattan office. The Congresswoman deeply regrets that she could not be here tonight, so I'm here on her behalf. I'll try to be brief, but to share a couple updates about what the Congresswoman has been working on lately. Firstly, the past couple of weeks have been very exciting for important pieces of legislation that Congresswoman Maloney had introduced and sponsored. For example, the Corporate Transparency Act, which the Congresswoman was the chief sponsor on, was passed out of the Financial Services Committee. This legislation would crack down on shell companies and anonymous LLCs. It would essentially force these companies to reveal their beneficiaries. This legislation, if passed out of the House and Senate and signed by the President, would then it would give law enforcement the tools necessary to crack down on money laundering operations. It would prevent the proliferation of anonymous shell and holding companies that buy up New York City real estate and then let those apartments sit empty and thereby driving up real estate prices and rent. This is an issue that the Congresswoman has been working on for a decade now, and so the fact that we now have a bill passed out of committee is very exciting. Another piece of legislation that got out of committee this week that had been introduced by Congresswoman Maloney is the Never Forget the Heroes Act, which is the Congresswoman's bill to permanently renew the Victim Compensation Fund for the victims of September 11th, for their families, for first responders, and for people who contracted illnesses from all of the debris and destruction of September 11th, because as many of you probably know, the federal fund, the Victim Compensation Fund that provides the support and compensation for 9/11 victims is running out, and Congress needs to reauthorize it. And so the Congresswoman's bill would make the VCF permanently funded, and it just passed out of the House Judiciary Committee. And it has more than, I think, 300 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives, so its passage in that body is almost guaranteed, and then it's up to the Senate to pass it. I'm sure a lot of you saw headlines about Jon Stewart testifying in front of Congress. That was for this bill, which the Congresswoman passed, and again, we're very excited that we're getting some movement on this much needed and absolutely crucial legislation. The third issue that I want to talk to you guys about is the 2020 census. So some of what the Congresswoman has been doing lately on this is she brought a field hearing of the House Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Civil Liberties to New York City to do a hearing at LaGuardia Community College in Queens, where members of the Congressional Committee received testimony from local activists, immigration rights advocates, and experts about why the 2020 census will be so important for New York City and what an undercount would do to our city. And to reiterate some of those points, the 2020 census will be incredibly important for New York City. The census data is in many ways the bedrock of American democracy. Census data informs how much money basically every part of the country gets from the federal government. It is not an endless pit, it is a pie, and if our city is not adequately counted, we lose money and we lose representation. If we get an undercount in the census, we risk losing money for SNAP, for WIC, for public schools, for public transportation, for infrastructure, and potentially most damagingly, we might lose political representation. We might lose congressional seats. If Roosevelt Island is undercounted, Roosevelt Island's political power might be further diluted by being pushed into a artificially larger city, state, or even congressional district. And yeah, so this is going to be a really, really, really big census for America and for New York City. And so part of why I'm bringing this up is because right now, you can all sign up to get jobs with the 2020 census. And why am I bringing this up? It's because nobody knows Roosevelt Island better than Roosevelt Islanders. If you want to make sure that everybody on Roosevelt Island gets counted, sign up for a couple of shifts to go out and to count your neighbors, to do the counting of the census questionnaires, to advise government agents and community-based organizations about how to make sure that every single housing unit in Roosevelt Island is counted. If you live in an apartment building, for example, that has a basement unit that may or may not be listed on official postal service rolls, Roosevelt Islanders will know that, probably will have a better chance of not missing that apartment than the Census Bureau without your help. So I really encourage everybody to consider going to 2020census.gov/jobs. I think the minimum payment is $25 an hour for working with the Census Bureau, and which is, I think, pretty good. But again, it's really important that everybody gets counted. And I think that we're still taking cards for questions.
Right.
And yeah, okay, so from there I'd also like to move on to one question that I received, which is very long, but I'll summarize it by basically saying it's about helicopters and seaplanes flying over Roosevelt Island and the 59th Street Bridge and tram. And I'm really glad that somebody brought this issue up, because this is an issue that Congresswoman Maloney feels very, very strongly. Case in point. Congresswoman Maloney strongly believes that non-essential helicopters and other small craft should not be flying over New York City. That just seems, it's dangerous, it's disruptive, and as we saw earlier this week, it can be fatal. It can lead to terrible accidents, and so that is why this week the Congresswoman has renewed her calls for the Federal Aviation Administration to ban non-essential helicopter flights over the city of New York. This is an issue we've been working on for a long time and met a lot of resistance from the federal government in providing robust regulations. And I just wanted to, whoever sent up this question, I just wanted to let you know that this is an issue that our office is definitely working on and trying to get moving on as quickly as possible.
It's my question. I just really wanted you to read the whole question.
Read it out loud.
I've been here for 22 years. Okay. I brought this up at the last town hall meeting last year, as you can see in my comments. Caroline said that it's been a thorn in her side for many years. I wrote to your office, I never heard a response. Obviously, with Monday's issue, it could have landed on the top of my building, on anybody's building here. And so nothing has been done, and I'm upset. Saturday, I was coming home, the helicopter literally flew over the tram. And it was just, so I don't want to be here next year talking about the same thing. I know she's very busy in Albany, but do we have to wait again?
Thank you for sharing this, and I'm very sorry that our office never got back to you. I have your contact info on the card. I will be sure to pass that on to our point person on helicopter issues. But we are working very hard to try to get something done as soon as possible on this issue. And I will put you in touch with our point of contact in our office on this issue. And okay, cool. 2 questions about the census. Question number 1, what about the citizenship question on the census? Excellent question. Very important. So, I love talking about the census, so if I start going on too long, please stop me. I'm going to try to keep this brief. Essentially, the Trump administration proposed adding a new question to the decennial census, asking, are you a citizen? And this poses a lot of problems, both logistical and demographical. So for one thing, the Trump administration has not shown itself to be a friend of immigrants, and every expert analysis of what the citizenship question would do indicate that it would depress census participation, particularly in dense urban areas with lots of immigrants. Because it's not just people who are undocumented who be scared away from answering, but it's also people who are here on an immigration status whose long-term durability, as we call it, in question. DACA recipients, streamers, people who are here on TPS from countries like Haiti or Vietnam might also be afraid that if they give this information to the federal government, then that could put them in jeopardy. It's worth noting that Title 13 of the United States Code creates very strong protections against the misuse or sharing of personally identifiable data out of the Census Bureau. That said, having a citizenship question will still most likely scare a lot of people away from answering. This will create a severe undercount in New York City if it's not met with a robust education and outreach effort from local and state organizers. And the citizenship question has also been in the news lately because it was recently discovered that recently uncovered documents indicate that the Trump administration wanted to add the citizenship question with the direct intention of creating an undercount of immigrant and Latino populations, and that was the entire political reason for wanting to add it, which also demonstrates that Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross lied to Congress before when he said that the reason he wanted it was to enforce the Voting Rights Act, which is why Congress is now holding Secretary Ross in contempt of Congress, because he lied. And I don't think that's okay. And so the Congresswoman is actually a co-plaintiff on a lawsuit to try to get the citizenship question thrown off the census. She also is the sponsor of the 2020 Census IDEA Act, which would legislatively block the citizenship question. And right now, the lawsuit is that I mentioned before is in front of the Supreme Court, which is expected to hand down its decision later this month. It is not clear whether or not the citizenship question will be on the census. If it is, we're going to need to work really, really, really hard to make sure that people aren't scared away from filling out the census, because we need to fill out the census, to protect the interests of New York and Roosevelt Island and all of our fellow community members. We need to get as close to a full and accurate count as possible. It is a power move to fill out the census. And so.
I have a question regarding that we're answering regarding the citizenship in the census.
Yeah.
So we know what has been going on lately with the lies, politics, we don't hire Trump administration and all that. So my question is, if it's okay not to answer the citizenship question in the census, or even if it's not answered, will it be still use that information against us? Because we have seen the news. For example, I'm not a citizen in this country, but I'm legally here, and I'm just scared that if I answer for the citizenship question, that my kids or my family will be in jeopardy by the Trump administration. So that will be what happens if we deny to answer to that question here in this slide. Will that affect a lot, or will that affect, or that information will still be shared?
So thank you for asking that question, and thank you for your honesty. That was a bold move. if you don't answer any part of your census questionnaire, most likely your questionnaire will still be counted. However, if significant parts of your questionnaire are handed in unanswered, you might get a follow-up, either a phone call or someone knocking at the door from the Census Bureau to ask follow-up questions. It is against the law for employees of the federal government, myself included, to advocate not filling out any portion of the US Census, so I need to be very careful with my words right now. I also want to go back to my point before that. According to some of the harshest federal laws, whatever you put on the census, on your census questionnaire, is secure. That data is secure. It cannot be shared with any other government agency. It cannot be shared with the Department of Homeland Security. It cannot be shared with the FBI. It cannot be shared with the local police department. Any information obtained by the United States Census Bureau stays at the United States Census Bureau. That is, the penalties for violating that are like $500,000 in fines, I believe, or 5 years in prison. So your data with the Census Bureau is accurate. I understand, though, that with the Trump administration, where it is, and its history of unfriendly behavior towards immigrants and immigrant communities, that this is a scary prospect. But I encourage everybody to fill out the census as truthfully and accurately as they can. But again, leaving 1 or 2 questions off your questionnaire, theoretically, will still be counted.
The citizen questions are already answered on the community survey.
Sorry?
It's already counted on the community survey.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I have 2 more questions about the census. In 2010, several buildings in the Southtown prevented census takers from entering their addresses. This limited Roosevelt Island clout and violated the law. What can be done? Great question. Get a job with the Census Bureau. Because it won't just help the Census Bureau know where to go and who to ask. Roosevelt Islanders are more likely to open the door and talk to people from Roosevelt Island. If someone comes to your door and says like, "Hi, I'm from the government, I'm wearing a suit, I want your information," that could be a little bit scary to some people. But if somebody hears their neighbor knocking on the door saying, "Hi, I want to ask you a couple questions just to get your information down," there's more of a chance that relationship will prove successful. Additionally, this will be the first census in American history that you can fill out online. If you go to census, when you receive your census mailer in the mail, it will have like a personal ID code, but you can also go to census.gov. So that's another thing is, tell everybody you know to go, when Census Day starts on April 1st, 2020, tell everyone you know, go on the internet, fill out the census. Even if they live in an apartment complex that's hard to reach and that's difficult to canvass, tell them to go on the internet. And also, again, just one more pitch, 2020census.gov/jobs.
The problem is not getting through the door, the problem is getting past the door. The entire building was interdicted because they wouldn't let census takers go onto an elevator and talk to people.
Okay, so that requires a conversation with the doorman, I think. Okay, there are too many people talking right now and I can't hear everyone. Okay.
Someone needs to speak to Southtown's management about the wall.
There's only 17 building complexes on the island. It's a tractable problem.
If there are buildings on Roosevelt Island where the management has policies in place that are preventing census canvassers, then first of all, you can reach out to our office because we have a working relationship with the local census regional office, and we are part of what we do is we are continually trying to create relationships between the Census Bureau and community stakeholders at every level. And so creating a rapport between building managers and people who work for the Census Bureau, I think is something that could help to ensure a higher count in 2020. Yeah, definitely reach out to our office with any questions if you think of any after this is over. One more question about the census. Undercounting. Undercounting foreign students who live 4 to 6 Wait, I'm sorry. Got it. Okay, so the question then becomes about, the question is about multiple people living in single units, including foreign students. Okay, so there are two things in there that I want to address. Number one is like foreign students and also non-Americans. The census is supposed to count everybody in the United States. If you are here, if you live here for 1 month, and that 1 month happens to be when the census is being taken, you should be counted on the census. So if you know someone who's a temporary resident of the United States, or they're here on a student visa, and they say, well, I'm not going to fill out the census, I'm only here for a couple months, tell them to fill out the census. They should fill out the census. And the second question is about multiple residents in single units. Every housing unit, so the questionnaires are by housing unit, not by person. So, so if there are like 4 or 5 people who are living as roommates or family members, what have you, in a single housing unit, they need to fill out one questionnaire for that unit and include all of their information on it. If a census questionnaire is submitted and 1 or 2 of the people who live in that apartment, like their information isn't on it, either because somebody forgot or someone didn't know that they were supposed to be on the census, but then they found out better, you can go to the census website, or you can call the Census Bureau's phone number, and you can request a supplemental questionnaire. But make it clear that that person, you're not asking for a brand new questionnaire for a housing unit, you're asking to tack another person on to a household that has already been counted. Everybody needs to be counted in the census. The questionnaires go by household, not by person. And I know that sometimes it can also be scary, because one reason why some people don't want to fill out the census is because they have more people in a single housing unit than they think that they're supposed to. And that brings me back to your census data is private. If you're afraid of your landlord finding out that you have a roommate that you didn't tell them about, if you live in an apartment building that has certain rules, that is a matter to take up with someone else, not with the Census Bureau. Everybody needs to be counted on the census. Everybody. And I think that is all of the questions.
Can we thank David for a detailed